Man, I was just listening to that song Angel Eyes by ABBA. There's a little chorus that they often utilize nowadays in TikTok videos or Instagram clips, and it goes a little something like this. Sometimes when I'm lonely, I sit here and think about you, and I think about the good days, so on, etc. Anyway, for me, it's a difficult line to hear, especially hearing it sung that particular way. Brings back some good memories of a person I used to be with at a particular time in my life, which was a good time in my life. And the sadness that I can't get over is the fact that I didn't even realize how good I had it and how I've never experienced something like that prior or since that time. And that's a sadness I just can't get over. That's sad, man. That's pathetic, right? Anyway, along the lines of things that are making me kind of sad is today's video. I think I'm going to talk about bullies and bullying in general. And I've been bullied for the majority of my life, I would say, since I was a younger individual to this very day. It's something that like I'm still trying to like deal with or cope with, and I don't really know how to do it in a healthy way, unfortunately. So this is like a lesson I'm learning, and this is what the video is going to be all about. But I look back on some of the videos, or rather some of the photos I've seen in my family albums when I was young, preteen. I was very confident, I was seemingly happy, well adjusted, I would have my arms around my friends, my family, so on, etc. And then that kind of stops around when I started entering in high school. And it wasn't because I was being rebellious, it was because I felt like massively insecure, especially in a social setting, that suddenly touching somebody or smiling or speaking seemed borderline inappropriate. And I was always worried about consequences, because I had a particular person, more or less like telling me consistently that I was not good enough. Before I go further with this video, I want to make a disclaimer that I do love my mom very much. She has done a lot for me in my life. I understand that no parents are perfect, but as I get older, we definitely grew apart. And the reasoning behind that is there's a certain element of abuse that she kind of relishes in for whatever particular reason, whether it was trauma she experienced as a youth, or maybe she just enjoys causing somebody a little bit of pain and anxiety, which people often do. But speaking for myself, I recall as a young teenager, your wonder years, when you start engaging with other people and you start hanging out with them a little bit more independently. So you're going out a little bit later, you're hanging out at someone's house, or maybe you're going to Chuck E. Cheese or the mall, something along those lines. That's what we used to do back in our day. My mom would get increasingly possessive and a little bit resentful as well. I think maybe she was resentful overall because maybe she had me a little bit younger than she anticipated, and I took away a bit of her youth. I'm not quite sure, but she would seem a little bit angry when I would go out. Sometimes she would be angry. But she would always, 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 before I would go out, she would want to see me, which a lot of parents do, I imagine. And she would say something massively negative. Everything from, I don't like the way your hair is, you're actually going out with your hair like that. I've more or less had the same haircut since I've been a kid. So she would say something like, oh, your skin is too dry, or you're a little broken out, or your skin's too oily, you're walking a little weird, your foot flares out a little bit, I don't like those shoes, ooh, your posture is really bad, did you put on some weight? Why are you putting those clothes on? And she would say it, and it wouldn't be brought up in a humorous way, and wouldn't be brought up as a constructive way. It would just be brought up in a way to point out that something's not quite right with you. And this would continue. This pattern would continue for years and years and years. As I aged, I came to understand that there really wasn't much wrong with me. I mean, you could point this out on pretty much anybody that exists. But it's difficult to look back on photos when I was a teenager and young adult of me borderline looking like I'm crippled with fear, because that's exactly what was going on in my head. I would even get high anxiety about shaking someone's hand. Did I shake it hard enough? Did I shake it too hard? Did I hold on to a little bit long? Stuff along those lines that you really shouldn't think about, but I was just constantly critical of myself because I internalized so much negativity. And thus, when I was also in relationships, and I'll point out like intimate relationships, because those tend to hurt the worst when they conclude, and there tends to be like more of a, um, you know, a breakup. But I remember I would have like a girlfriend or someone I was dating, and I would be into that person, and I would feel deep down that I wasn't good enough for them. There was just something about me that wasn't good enough for them. And I would just keep this feeling in the back of my mind. And of course, if you feel that way, things are probably going to implode to some degree. They're just simply not going to work out. And I remember sometimes I would even find like little tiny faults with people, just like my mom did with me, and I'd point those out too. Whether that was just like a repetitive behavior, or maybe I wanted to knock them down a notch and make them feel like I did. I'm not quite sure why I did that, but I remember a few things my mom would point out. And I was sitting with a girlfriend one day, and I was pointing these things out about myself, and she kind of looked at me like kind of weird, like, why are you thinking that way? Or like, I would have never noticed X, Y, and Z about you. And I was just like, my mom used to point that out about me. Isn't that weird? Isn't that odd? Isn't that like unfortunate? And she agreed, and I think she just still thought it was like kind of odd that you would actually like do that. Like, and I would say around that time as well, when I became in high school, a lot of people get bullied around this time. It's like your awkward years, but most people will grow out of it, or get some help, or stick up for themselves a little bit. All it takes is a little, and it goes a long way. But for myself, I was so incredibly vulnerable, and I would just not even thinking about the bullies. I was thinking about what was wrong with me. Is my shoes, are they tied on too tight? Are they tied on not like tight enough? Am I walking straight? Like silly stuff like that. And bullies can obviously smell that from a million miles away. It's like a wounded fish in the ocean. And I got bullied incredibly bad. I mean, slightly physical, but intense physical violence was threatened to me. I was scared. I was not sleeping. And I remember I would bring this up to my mom, like, kind of like, what do I do? And my mom would get so angry at me, because obviously there was something I was doing incorrectly that was making them do this to me. And I believe that. And that, like, that's so illogical. And I couldn't believe my mom was getting so angry with me. She would get so angry with me that she wouldn't want to hear about anything I was going through. And to this day, I've never had a real conversation with either of my parents, and my dad has since passed away. And that's a shame, because you should have conversations with parents, but I didn't. I remember telling a teacher that was very good, and she kind of looked at me like a little bit odd, and she didn't really know what to do. Now, since that time, this was like, 30 years ago, things have changed, right? Like bullying, kids take classes on it, teachers take classes on it. But back then, it wasn't something that teachers like intervened with on a regular basis. So she kind of just had like an odd response to me, which was kind of like, why are you asking me this? This is beyond my pay grade. This is not what I was trained to do. And that was like, I remember feeling like, that was the end for me, man. I felt like that was like the worst day of my life. Like, I couldn't believe that, like, I had no one to talk to. And I just felt like so low. And I continued through high school, just like, I would have a bully sometimes like corner me up real quick and punch me in the stomach, grab my lunch money, grab my Walkman, grab my CD player, grab whatever I had. And that was the end of the conversation. Whatever I had, they wanted, they would take. And I just floated through high school like that, and I would just get made fun of, and I was a sweaty like wreck. I think like toward the tail end of high school, I went through puberty, I joined some sports, and the bullying stopped to some degree, maybe because I was a little bit physically intimidating at that time compared to the average Joe. And I thought it concluded to some degree. I knew it was still a part of me, but college came, and I remember I was within a group, and overall they were very cool. Like, my memories are positive. Um, but the group would try to act like they're inclusive. There were like a lot of punk rockers, but a lot of them were really exclusive. And you would get bullied if you weren't smart enough, or you'd get bullied if you weren't like punk enough, stuff along those lines. It still exists in those circles. Um, and I'd become very passive aggressive around this time in my life, and that don't really like bode well for anybody in any setting, especially a professional setting. But I remember in college early on, I had a really beautiful girlfriend, and it was a girlfriend I always like. I was like, man, I wish I could go out with a girl like that. And sure enough, it happened. And I was like, oh my God. And that's when everything hit me. My anxiety. I'm not good enough for this person. Oh my God, they're going to notice the way I'm walking. Oh man, my hair, I'm not having the best hair day. They're going to leave me. And it was just constantly going through my mind. I can't even make a joke or have a conversation with this person suddenly, because we're in a relationship now, and we were just like acquaintances prior to this. So the relationship was so rigid. Like, it would just, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to speak with her. I didn't know how to be close to a human being. And understandably, it ended. And I was so brokenhearted, because I knew for me, it was something very different. It was like a test almost for me. Young love breaks up all the time, right? Puppy love or whatever. But this was like a little bit different, because it hurt, I think, in ways, because I felt like I was unworthy, and that's what like hurt my mind as well. And I remember trying to talk to a few people within my group about it, and I was pretty much bullied for that too. And then finally, and the most recently, in the workplace, bullies are around you as well. I used to work some jobs that had a pretty good environment, and some I've like gone through in previous videos have been fairly toxic, and bullies have been around, and they'll bully you because maybe they're better at your job than you are, and they want everyone to know it. Or it's just something like they'll find out something you did wrong, and they'll keep on pointing at it, and they'll like prod you in that way, and they kind of get you there. And there's, at least for me, I don't know how to handle that outside of being extremely aggressive at them. So it's still something I deal with. Point being, no one listens to the channel, right? But if you do, and if you are kind of a bully, just stop, because what it does to somebody, especially when they internalize that stuff, it makes their life not enjoyable anymore. And you don't want to do that to another human being, right? Like, knowing that like some of the actions you took made their life like not enjoyable. And life is like incredibly short. You know that when you get a little bit older as well. And like seeing that, like having days you wake up and you're just not enjoying things, man, that's like difficult, man. But if you're the cause of that, like, stop. Just stop, man. Do something else with your life, man. Just get over it, because a lot of it is these people do have a backbone, but they just don't know how to bring it up. They've gone through this. They've gone through previous trauma, and this is still like a continuation of that, and you're still doing that to them. Likewise, maybe you're older and you have a kid, right? And you see your kid is a bit of a bully, and you're like, it's just, school stuff. The person's going to be good-hearted. And I disclaimer, I've met some bullies that are like now like excellent human beings, right? Because they really weren't a bully. It was just something the way they reacted at the particular time in their life. So, but tell them not to do that. Tell them not to do that. That could really mess somebody up. And it's better to pick someone up than put them down. So keep that in mind. And I'll just leave it at that, man. My heart's broken right now just thinking of that like silly song I heard, and thinking about like the life maybe I could have had a few times, but you just don't feel like you feel like you're worth less than zero. So don't feel that way. If you do speak to somebody, I do feel that way, and maybe like we can work together for a better tomorrow. I don't know. Be kind to somebody today. Be kind to yourself. Have a good one, man.